Before we begin today's episode of Potterless, I just wanted to thank everybody who participated in our new hashtag on Twitter, Fuck Quidditch Friday. It was a good time where everybody just ranted about their least favorite things about the sport I hate so much. And it was great, and everyone was bringing up silly discussions and being jokingly angry, and it was hilarious and everything that I want in social media interaction with Potterless. I love interacting with you guys on social media. I always view Potterless as a team thing. We're all in this together. It's a group. It's why I always refer to this as a we thing and not just me. And it's great. I'm also going to do Wizard on Wednesdays, where I will pose some sort of discussion topic that is a very silly thing that I would probably bring up in an episode and just see what you guys have to say about that. So please feel free to join in the discussion there. I really enjoy interacting with you guys on social media, especially in a goofy and silly manner. Also, Potterless is now on Google Play and TuneIn. If you guys happen to use those, we are now there, so we're kind of expanding our horizons. If there's any sort of podcast app that you use that I'm not on, please reach out to me on social media, let me know, and I will do whatever it takes to get it on there. I want you guys to be able to listen to Potterless in the most convenient way possible, so do not hesitate to reach out to me. Also, shout out to our newest patrons, Kathleen Danielson, who I forgot to say 2 weeks ago, I'm so sorry, Jacob Reed, Ellie without the E, and Low Downtown. Thank you guys so much. And of course, thank you as always to our producer level patrons, Leanne Davis, Griffin Meckelberg, Andreas Ozelby, Vicky Garcia, and Aaron Johnson, who always wake up the first time without hitting snooze a million times. Thank you guys so much. And without further ado, let's get into the next section of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire with David Tress as we actually get into the Quidditch World Cup and I get to face my fears of talking almost exclusively about Quidditch for an hour. Enjoy. Hello, Internet! Welcome back to another episode of Potterless, the tale of a 24-year-old man reading the Harry Potter series for the first time. We are back at it again with David Tress to talk more about his least favorite section of his least favorite book in the series, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. David, how's it feel to be back?
It feels great. Thanks so much for having me back.
No problem.
Very much appreciated, and I'm excited to get into this great Quidditch match that we have on the horizon.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So Chapter 6, the Portkey. So apparently all of these wizards are supposed to show up to the Wizarding World Cup incognito, which I'm confused about a number of things with this. I get that there's like a bunch of people, and there's a lot of wizards coming to it, but if nobody knows Hogwarts exists, can't they similarly just make a giant stadium that no one knows exists? I feel like there's ways around this.
Yeah, there's got to be some established geographic locations that it's just like, this is a wizard space, and like this is going to be a safe place. Like it shouldn't be that like, oh, we have this biggest event of the year, and now we're suddenly hard pressed and need to go through all these efforts to hide it. Yeah. It's just like these people live their lives. Like, aren't there, cities and towns just with wizards? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't understand it. So some of the Weasleys are going to apparate there, but none of the students, because it's very difficult and you have to pass an apparition test and then you get an apparition license. So it's basically the wizard equivalent of driving.
Yeah.
Is knowing how to apparate.
A little better, a little quicker than driving. But you get sick, right? Don't you get, like, if you're not good at apparating, like it...
I don't know about it mentioning sickness, but it did mention that you can splinch yourself.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Which is the technical term for leaving half of yourself behind, and then someone has to do like an anti-splinching spell to help you.
Yeah, truly horrific.
Yeah, sounds horrible. So they have to go incognito because it's a large gathering of wizards, and that would be suspect. Mrs. Weasley accios a billion toffees out of the twins' pockets because they were going to bring their toffees that mess with people to the Quidditch World Cup, which would have been absolutely hilarious, but Mrs. Weasley, no fun.
Yeah, no, again, killing the entrepreneurial spirit of her sons. They could have made a pretty penny over there.
Yeah, but we will learn that they're about to make a pretty penny off of some weirdly suspect betting.
It's true. Underage betting.
Yeah, very strange. So first, they must stagger the arrivals. So some wizards take Muggle transportation, some apparate, and some use port keys, which I know is a thing because I've seen the fourth movie, and I know a portkey leads to Cedric Diggory's death, and the Goblet becomes one. That's all I know at the moment. But speaking of that, they meet up with Amos Diggory, who is Cedric's dad, and he has an old boot that's a portkey, apparently. And here's what I think is super messed up, and I don't know if she meant to do this or whatever, but his son dies because of a portkey, and he's the one that's got a portkey. It's super fucked up, super terribly fucked up.
I didn't even pick up on that foreshadowing. That guy is kind of rude, though. He's very mean.
Oh, he's a huge asshole.
He's very mean to Harry. Poor Harry.
Yeah.
Just gloating that his son beat him in the last Quidditch match that they played against each other.
Yeah, my notes in this is, oh my god, his son dies from a portkey. That's so fucked up, JK. How could you? But then I go on to write, Cedric's dad flips out when he meets Harry Potter, saying that Cedric beating Harry Potter in Quidditch is something that Cedric is going to tell his kids and his grandkids. And then my note says, okay, never mind, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
Because you got to think about this situation. A fully grown man is going up to a 13-year-old kid and saying oh my god, so nice to meet you. The fact that my son beat you in a bullshit game of Quidditch where you were almost killed by Dementors is something that he's going to brag about to his kids for the end of time.
And on top of that, this is a child who is famous for being an orphan.
Yeah.
He is being so mean to this child who he just met out of the blue, and his son even knows better. He's like, Dad, Jesus Christ, lay off of him.
Yeah, Cedric's even Dad, he fell off his broom. It wasn't fair. And his dad goes, yeah, well, one person fell off their broom and one did not. Quote, you don't have to be a genius to know who's the better flyer. Oh my god, fuck you. There were Dementors that swarmed Harry and started to suck his soul away. Sorry he couldn't stay on a broom in the freezing rain.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. He's a jerk, and his son deserves to die. No, that's not true. That's too far.
But this does go back to what we mentioned last time on the previous episode that we recorded, where when she makes people mean, it's just so heavy-handedly mean.
Totally.
It is so over-the-top mean. Malfoy is the meanest bully ever. All he does is call Ron poor and call Harry an orphan and call Hermione a mudblood, and that is it.
Yeah.
And Lucius Malfoy is just always over-the-top mean and rude. I guess because it's a children's book, you have to really heavy-handedly push it along. These people are mean. These people are jerks. But it's no one ever acts like this, ever. No human being.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, there is one of the things, I had kind of forgotten the severity of the viciousness, because there's even worse stuff, later on in the section that we read, about victimized muggles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the themes of prejudice and bigotry and bullies in general are so strong, and I really do think so many people read these books, and I bet it did, just a positive note, I bet it did inform a lot of young people's feelings around, seeing prejudice and intolerance throughout their lives.
Yeah. I do think it's good that the three main characters in the book, you've got an orphan, a poor kid, and, a mudblood, which doesn't seem like a bad thing, but is basically the equivalent of being a minority.
Yeah, that's straight up just a stand-in for a racial slur for Hermione.
Yeah, so I think it's good that JK did that, and then, she did things in the future by going backtracking, being oh, by the way, Dumbledore was gay, and all this other stuff, which I think is good.
It would have been cooler if she actually included that stuff, but it's fine to do it in retrospect.
I do think it's good, and I guess what you're saying does make sense in the fact that it's for a kid's book. So the only way to teach kids these types of lessons, don't be racist or don't call people poor or whatever, is to be super obvious.
Yeah.
It makes sense of why she did it the way she did. I just find it kind of annoying.
Yeah, totally. But now that we got a real life Voldemort in the Oval Office, maybe the lessons of Harry Potter are more pertinent than ever.
Oh man, yeah. So this episode is being recorded about a week after the election. So
reveal.
By the time I release this, if America still exists,
yeah, it's just a smoldering heap of ash.
But people are still listening to podcasts, hopefully. So
yeah, in their bunker.
Either that or my 12 Canadian listeners are really going to be holding on strong. It's fun to look at the demographics of where the listens are coming from, because I get one person in strange countries. It'll be one person in Trinidad and Tobago listen to your podcast. Oh. It's fuck yeah.
That's great. Well, hello, Trinidad and Tobago. That sounds great.
How's it going? Good to see you.
Yeah.
So they do the portkey, and that is the end of chapter 6. Mm-hmm. So we get into to Chapter 7, Bagman and Crouch. The Weasleys go to check in to an inn, and they struggle with muggle money, which makes for this fun thing where they can't read numbers, apparently, because the guy's like, you need to give me $50, and he gives him, like, too much money. I get that it's not the same money, but I feel like you should still understand how numbers work since you speak English.
Yeah, totally. And there's also just this thing, like, the human world isn't, or the muggle world isn't, like, secret to wizards. So they have the opportunity to, like, learn all of this stuff.
Yes.
It shouldn't be, like, completely foreign.
And Mr. Weasley prides himself on, like, knowing fun trivia facts about muggle things. You think he'd be like, oh, they use this thing called money.
Isn't that what he does at the Ministry of Magic?
Yeah.
It's literally his job, and he can't recognize a money if it's on, or a number if it's on a foreign object.
Yeah.
It's very crazy.
It's very silly. Very, very silly. So the keeper gets very suspect. You're the second person to not know how money works, and he's like, also, how does everybody know each other here? And starts asking more questions, and then Mr. Weasley uses Obliviate to Men in Black the hell out of him, so he doesn't remember anything, etc. Mm-hmm. So they go to their spot. They say it's the best spot. It's like the closest you can, because you like camp out before the game starts, like the night before. So they make this like really tiny, seemingly muggle tent, and Harry's like, it looked really shitty. And then they walk inside, and it's like a 3-room flat with a bathroom and a kitchen, and it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's one of the things I know that my friends and I, when we would talk about Harry Potter as kids, there was always this desire. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be the coolest if this actually existed? And I feel like it was details like that where it's just like, that's just a really fun conceptual
super fun
thing. Like,
super
that would
fun.
Be great if that existed.
Yeah, and it's like the ultimate version of glamping, which I learned is a word for glam camping, which I think is great. So the squad wants to see what the Bulgarian tents look like, because only white people go to Hogwarts, so they want to learn about other races. They go to the tents, and they all have Crumb posters. He's their seeker, he's the best seeker in the world, and he's 18, which is really cool, but also like kind of weird that a bunch of people are obsessed with a high school senior.
Yeah.
Just like kind of creepy.
Yeah, just posters all over.
It's a bit strange, but it makes sense somewhat, because everybody really liked Kobe once he started playing, or LeBron, or even Pulisic with the new soccer team. But the fact that it seems like the only thing that Bulgaria has going for them is this dude is a little weird.
And Harry Potter, he was the most famous person in the world, and he was just a baby.
Yeah.
They love little tiny baby boys. They're the most popular people in the world.
Wizards are strange. So there's an argument between some wizards, which I think is just a fun little side story. There's this old dude who wants to wear a muggle dress, and this younger guy is like, yo, you can't wear that. And he's like, what do you mean? I bought it in a muggle shop. He's like, yes, but that's what muggle women wear. And he's like, bah, whatever. I like to have a breeze between my knees.
Good for him.
And it's just a fun little argument. I didn't necessarily like this first section of the book, but this little side argument was easily my favorite part.
Yeah, totally. I really like this like next little stretch where they're just kind of exploring and getting these small windows into all these different wizarding cultures. Mm-hmm. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. So Oliver Wood is at the Quidditch match, obviously, because he's obsessed. Mm-hmm. He introduces Harry to his family, and he mentions that he got signed to a pro team, which is really cool. He's going to professionally play Quidditch, which is super dope.
Way to go, Oliver.
Also a thing to note, the fact that Cedric's dad said that this kid is going to, say about beating Harry in Quidditch is going to like be his fondest memory. This is basically like winning a high school basketball game or something, or high school football, and being like, I'm going to remember this forever. Like, they're playing Quidditch at Hogwarts. There's professional teams, there's national teams, there's a World Cup. This is the lowest level of the sport. And he's like, oh, I beat Harry when he was a kid. It's great.
Totally. That's kind of like, it's not like someone beat Michael Jordan when he was playing on a high school team, because we don't know if Harry's going to go on and be a great Quidditch player.
Yeah.
So, and also you're just setting up your son as a loser if his defining moment, just this high school game, man. Yeah. You did great.
Yeah, good job, kid.
That's when you peaked.
You didn't even do anything. It was just the Dementors took Harry away, so no one else was going after the snitch except for you. Good job, Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
You did it.
Which is a thing that is very, very apparent later on. People don't really care when you interfere with Quidditch games.
No, not at all.
It's very welcome. It's all like a fair game. You could be throwing Molotov cocktails onto the field and people wouldn't care.
Yeah, like in Azkaban, the three kids, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, like dress as Dementors, go on the field, try to fuck with Harry, and they have no repercussions.
Right.
They take away 50 points from the House Cup, whatever, but like they altered with the only sport at the school in one of the most pivotal games.
Yeah.
What?
I think it's time for a rematch at that point. It's kind of crazy.
Ridiculous. Harry then goes on to see Cho Chang, who waves and smiles at Harry, which is a big deal, setting up their future love situation. Mm-hmm. Ron drops the first mention that other wizarding schools exist, which I think is really cool, the fact that they've like not mentioned this at all, and then they're like, oh, by the way, there's more wizarding schools. The older Weasleys then apparate in. They meet up with Ludo Bagman. He's the guy that got the Weasleys their tickets.
Yep.
And they got really good tickets. Bagman and Mr. Weasley decide that they're going to bet on the match. And they're doing very boring bets like, I'll bet you 1 galleon that Ireland wins. And then Fred and George step in. And they're like, yo, we'll bet 37 galleons that Ireland wins but Crumb catches the snitch, which is oddly specific. Painfully specific.
That's true.
That'd be like placing a bet on a football game and saying,
oh, I bet the Patriots win on a pass play to this particular receiver from 85 yards away.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly specific.
So specific.
It's an odd enough number that it's just like, oh, this is probably all of your money, guys. What do you know? What's happening here?
Yeah, I'm hoping that they have something where they knew that this would happen, because immediately Mr. Bagman is like, yeah, you're on. That is the dumbest bet I've ever heard.
And also, he's the commissioner of this. Like, isn't he, like, in charge of everything? I'm sure there is, like, some conflict of interest that he's, like, betting on.
Oh, of course.
On the
terrible.
outcome.
It's basically like if the NFL commissioner was just betting on outcomes of games.
Yeah.
It'd be so suspect. Also, from my knowledge of the fourth movie, because I have seen it, I know that this happens. So immediately I'm like, how the fuck did they know that this would happen? Like, did they get a time turner?
Yeah.
How did they know? Did they pay Crumb a lot of... I don't know how they knew that this was going to happen, because it's an unprecedented thing that very rarely happens in Quidditch. But they're like, this is going to happen.
Yeah, they are either just prophets or they know something. I like have no memory of if there's any like follow up to this explanation.
We'll have to see. They also offer to throw in a fake wand as part of, like, their life savings. They're like, oh, and this fake wand. And Bagman gives them props. He's like, wow, this is a really good fake wand. And Percy gets really mad about that. He's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. So Mr. Weasley and Mr. Bagman have a conversation about Bertha Jorkins. They're like, oh, any sight of Bertha? And Mr. Bagman replies, not a dicky bird. Which apparently means not a lot.
Yeah. Another phrase that I'm going to adopt and use in my day-to-day life and just confuse everyone around me.
Would you like to see this movie? Oh, not a dicky bird.
I'm sorry? What does that mean?
Oh, it means no.
Oh, okay.
So Barty Crouch then shows up, and that is Percy's boss. He calls Percy Weatherby, which means that Percy's real name is Weatherby, which is the most Percy name ever.
Yeah, which isn't an actual name, right?
No.
Is Weatherby?
No
human has that name.
No human at all. So you learn that Bagman and Crouch have been organizing this World Cup, and they hint at a major event happening at Hogwarts, but then conveniently have to leave. Clearly, this is the Triwizard Tournament, and as is customary practice in these books by J.K. Rowling, it's a very common thing where people are like, let me tell you about something really important. Oh, I gotta go.
Yeah.
So the squad goes to where you can buy various swag in support of the two teams. Ron gets a Dancing Shamrock hat, which is really cool. And he gets a Crumb action figure, which is super lame.
Yeah. And marches around. It's just like a little...
It's like a little person
man
that like climbs on your shoulders and stuff, which would be cool if it wasn't an 18-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Super weird. Harry then sees someone selling omnioculars, which is the coolest thing in the world.
Those are pretty neat.
It's these binoculars that let you replay and slow-mo things in live action. And it's basically like if you just get automatic highlights while you're watching a live sport, which is so cool. The coolest.
Yeah.
So the tent and this were like the two coolest things ever.
Yeah, just like super fun, clever inventions.
Super fun. I just wanted a chapter of all the cool stuff. That would have been so much more fun than, 3 chapters of, oh, the Dursleys are bad. Remember that?
Yeah.
The guy selling them sells them for 10 galleons. I looked this up on the internet, and that's about $100. Totally worth it.
Okay.
Totally worth it.
Wait, so what would the conversion rate, how much did they bet?
Oh,
Do we know
let's
that?
put it up right now. So I'm going to Google 1 galleon to USD. According to Wikipedia, It tells me in pounds. I don't care that. I want real money. I want dollars. Okay, so this is according to the Harry Potter wiki.
Oh, okay.
A galleon is the most valued coin of the wizarding currency. 1 galleon is equal to 17 sickles or 493 nuts. Galleons are made of gold. In the late 20th century, the galleon was the equivalent of 4.97 pounds or $10.17.
Okay.
A little more than $10.
And that's their highest, like, piece of currency?
Yes, is a $10 bill. Or at least it's the most valued coin. I don't know if they also have bills.
Right.
The twins bet like 37, but then the guy gave him 5 more for the wand. So they bet $430 on this significant amount on this painfully oddly specific Quidditch outcome.
Right. And their dad bet $10.
Yeah. And also, why didn't their dad like raise concern when they were like, we'll bet you $430 about this ridiculous thing? And their dad was like, yep.
Yeah, I think he did. I think he says like, oh, boys, I don't know about that. But Ludo Bagman like bullied him out of it. And he's just like, I'm just going to take your children for all they're worth.
Yeah, ridiculous. Harry buys the omnioculars. So he buys one for himself, he buys one for Ron, and he buys one for Hermione because Harry's loaded.
Yeah.
He's absolutely loaded.
Small fortune.
And then he tells Ron and Hermione, he's like, I'm not giving you guys Christmas presents for the next 10 years. And it's like, wait, you're only going to spend $10 on them per year? Like, you're a lousy friend.
Yeah, not very considerate.
Yeah, not very. So the horn sounds, and it is time to enter the stadium. And then we get into Chapter 8, the Quidditch World Cup. My first note, kill me.
Yeah, this is the end.
This is it. This is where I die. Death by reading. The stadium seats 100,000 people, which is pretty sizable.
Yeah.
But there are soccer stadiums that are larger. Barcelona's stadium seats like 103,000.
Oh, okay.
It's not like obnoxious. It's just like big.
Right.
But according to the movie one, it was like the craziest thing ever, like way more than 100,000.
Right.
There's 500 ministry workers using a muggle repelling charm on it so that people can't see it. Again, I don't know why they can't just do whatever Hogwarts does, but they have 500 people actively making sure muggles can't see it. Every time a muggle nears it, they remember something urgent that they must attend to, and then they have to leave. Now, this seems super sketchy, unless the stadium is in the middle of nowhere. Because what if someone like lives near the stadium, and then they just keep trying to go home? But every time they're going home, they're like, oh, I got to go to the dentist.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to pick up my dry cleaner.
Everyone in this town has suddenly come down with a case of dementia. Yeah, what if someone is going to pick up their child from school and it's like, oh, you know what, got to go back and turn off the oven.
It's ridiculous. So this has to be in the middle of nowhere. And then the other question is like, there's a muggle person that runs the campsite where they're camping. He works there. How does he, like, not forgotten something that he needs to run away to? Like, he's close enough to the stadium, right?
Yeah, totally. You know, there's holes. There's holes here.
Very, very much so. So again, someone describes that they have prime seats, and apparently prime seats at a Quidditch match means the box that is the highest up.
Right.
The best seats are the farthest away, which I don't understand.
The hardest to see, the furthest away.
I guess maybe because they're flying really high, it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so.
But it seems like they have the worst seats. And in the movie, they kind of like flip it where the Weasleys like don't have good seats. They have these really high seats, but in the movie, they're like, these are the worst seats.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In the movie, they like run into Malfoy
gotcha.
and they're like climbing the stairs. Ron is like, Dad, how much longer till we get to our seats? And then Lucius is like, let me just say that if it rains, you'll be the first to know. And then they're like, grumble, grumble, grumble. We're all the way in the top. But when you read the book, they're like, they were in the best seats and they're in the president's box with like fancy people. So the movie was just like, nah, fuck this part of the book.
Huh. Yeah.
Totally switches it up.
They just want to double down on how poor Ron is.
Yeah, they're like, Ron's poor, remember? But he could buy tickets to the World Cup. It's the top box at midfield. So the midfield aspect makes sense. If you're at the midfield of any sporting match, always the best.
Sure.
That at least makes sense. So Harry sees a house elf in the box, and at first he's like, oh, Dobby, what's up? The elf is like, I'm not Dobby, but I know Dobby. Dobby sucks. And they're like, what? And he's like, Dobby, ever since he has become free, is parading around that he's free and is like causing a bunch of trouble and is being an asshole. And it's like, oh, great. Glad Dobby turned out okay. He was already the worst, and now he's apparently a big piece of shit, and everybody hates him.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's good. Probably, I feel like these little elves are like literally slaves.
Yes.
So if he gets free, and now he's like happy and Maybe he's gonna lead a little elf revolution.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I know that everyone eventually comes to love Dobby because everyone's like, oh, when Dobby dies or whatever, it's really sad or whatever. But when I was first, when he first comes up in the second book, he's horrible. Like, he's absolutely awful. Talks in the third person, really annoying, uses bad grammar on purpose.
And that's another one of the voices that I forget. What's his name?
Jim
the guy
Dale,
who reads
the
it?
audiobook narrator.
Yeah, all of his house elves are quite insufferable.
Painfully high-pitched.
Which, I mean, I'm sure they're accurate. And they're,
Yes.
they seem to fit the characters, but they are not fun to listen to.
Not at all. Oh, man. So I know that I'm supposed to love Dobby, but I still hate him. And apparently he's like let this all get to his head. So I don't know when he's going to have this big heal where he turns into a good person, but he sucks. You find out that this is a girl house elf, and her name is Winky. She's the house elf of Barty Crouch.
Right.
So that comes into play later.
Percy's boss.
Yes. So she is saving the seat for Barty, and he's eventually going to come. But don't they have tickets? Like, why do you need to save the seat?
Right, yeah. And she's terrified of heights. So she's like up there, like quivering, scared out of her mind. And she doesn't need to be there at all.
The only thing that I could see this being for is I lived in Paris for a little bit and I went to soccer games. When you go to just a normal soccer game, you have your assigned seat. But when you go to a Champions League game, depending on what section you are in, some of it just becomes like a free-for-all. So it becomes like your ticket gets you into your section, but then it's first come, first serve for like how close you are. And I didn't know this. I got the seats and they're like randomly picked what seat you get, but you get to see, and I saw that my seats were really good, so I was like, oh, cool, like, I'll just show up, 10 minutes before it starts, like a normal person. Right. And that's what I did, and when I got there, like, everyone's in my seats, and I went to some dude, and I was like, hey, this is my seat, and then he, like, said something to me in French, and I was like, what? And then some dude eventually explained to me, they were like, yo, it's just like a free-for-all. And I was like, that's dumb. I'm used to America, where things are normal.
That's very upsetting, and I also, hopefully they weren't just being like, hey, let's just take this American seat.
It's like actually how it works.
Okay, good.
It might just be a specific thing with PSG's stadium, like the way it's set up and all kind of things like that.
That's madness, though.
It's a bit. But, I mean, whatever. What are you going to do? So maybe that's what this is. And
you're going to get a little house elf and get them to reserve your seat next time.
Maybe, that's what I should do. And then they can be the worst and super annoying. Yep. And then I'll throw a sock on them, and then they'll be free.
They'll leave you forever.
The teams bring out their mascots to perform a show before the match.
Yes.
And apparently Ireland's mascot is the leprechauns, which is
a cloud of leprechauns.
Which is amazing. Just like a bunch of leprechauns. I'm imagining the fish from Finding Nemo that just like form various shapes.
Yeah, totally. It's just a school of fish, a school of leprechaun.
Yeah. So the teams are bringing out their mascots to perform a show before the match. As you learn this, Fudge arrives, and he also arrives with the Bulgarian Minister of Magic. Mm-hmm. So he shakes Harry's hand and is like thanking him for defeating Voldemort. He mentions the scar, and Harry kind of describes it as like when you have a cast and everyone's like, oh, how'd you break your arm? He like mentions, he's like, everyone asks about the scar when they meet me. Like it was something like that. So the Malfoys then show up. And Lucius Malfoy, right off the bat, huge douchebag, he says to Mr. Weasley, quote, good Lord, Arthur, what did you sell to get tickets in the top box? Surely your house didn't sell for this much. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Here's what I don't understand. And they justify it by saying, Fudge didn't hear this, or Fudge wasn't paying attention, or whatever. But Lucius Malfoy is in a box of like the most important wizarding people in the world, like the richest, most influential people. And he just like publicly goes, hey, Mr. Weasley, you're a poor piece of shit. And just no one notices.
Yeah, that's the thing.
No one at all.
You wish that like someone like Ludo Bagman or someone would come and like stand up for Mr. Weasley at this point, or someone. There's adult people who are supposedly decent around.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Absolutely ridiculous. Ludo turns out to be the announcer, and he does so from the box, which I think is annoying. I would not want to watch the game sitting in the same room as the broadcaster.
Right, yeah.
It seems like a not pleasant experience. Also, there's no press box, apparently, at the World Cup. So there's like no newspapers or journalists or anything, or photographers. It's just people just watch. I was sad that Lee Jordan wasn't broadcasting the game. I was really hoping that Lee Jordan would come and just like, talk about how attractive everybody is.
Right.
The Bulgarian mascots come out, and they are Vila, which apparently is like super hot women that aren't really women, but are women. But basically all the boys puppy dog over them.
Yeah, no, it's super crazy. They're human people. They're like humanoid monsters. There's a handful of instances throughout this series where it's like, oh, just seems like an intelligent creature, but they have a way worse lot in life. Like the house elves, these people who are just like determined to be a mascot for this team of humans. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting problem.
So they like sing a song and then that like bewitches all the dudes to like hubba hubba over them.
Right.
Then the Ireland mascots come out and they are leprechauns, and it's amazing. A cloud of leprechauns, and they rain gold coins, which is great. Ron reaches out and like grabs a bunch and then gives them to Harry, and then is like, haha, now you have to buy me Christmas presents. Ron is cementing himself as an amazing person. He's really, really doing well in this book. He really took a big step up in Azkaban, and he took a even bigger one here.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Really excited about Ron's development.
He's just the best bud.
Yeah.
You can't ask for a better wingman.
So then the game starts. Harry starts watching everything in his slow-mo version of the Omni-Oculars, and he misses a score in real time. Score happens, and he's like, what? They haven't thrown the ball through. And Hermione's like, you fucking idiot, you're watching in slow-mo vision.
Yeah. Which is like a real thing that I've had happen if I'm like watching a sporting event that's like recorded or behind, like paused for some moment, and then I'm browsing Twitter at the same time.
Oh yeah, can't do it. Gotta stay away. That was so hard when I lived in Europe for 6 months, because I would want to watch sports games and not know the outcome. But it would be, 2 a.m. when they would start. I'd have to unfollow specific people on Twitter or like not look at particular friends' Facebooks or like whatever to not see if the Knicks won or whatever. Thankfully, the Knicks lost more often than anything, so it wasn't a surprise often, but what are you going to do? Crumb then pulls a sweet trick where he pretends to go for a snitch and like dive bombs at the ground.
Yeah.
And then pulls away at the last second, and the Irish Seeker just like face plants into the ground, which is killer. Crumb is absolutely vicious. So they have a medical timeout, which I've already ranted on and on about how you can't call timeouts in Quidditch because it's not a possession-based sport, so it doesn't make sense because you could just call a timeout right before Harry Potter's about to catch the snitch.
Oh,
right?
Look at that. You're breaking the game. I like it.
It's a further problematic thing here because they have like a medical timeout attending to the guy's wounds, which makes sense, but the balls keep moving. Because Crumb, while this is going on, is like his eyes are darting around and Harry notices and he's like actively looking for the snitch.
There's no preventing the seeking of the snitch at any point.
Can't they like do a spell where the snitch is just like invisible and then flies around or something? Because otherwise in any game, you should just like break someone's leg and then when everyone is down and not flying around, find the snitch.
Yeah.
And then just like keep following it.
It definitely is a system that encourages some like pretty rotten behavior because you could totally just injure someone terribly and be like, okay, let's go for it, guys.
So eventually Ireland is like killing it. They go up 130-10 because Bulgaria has made it to the final, but is shit at Quidditch apparently.
Yeah, Crumb's the only good person on their team apparently.
But I mean, in Quidditch, the Seeker's the only one that matters. You just have to be not 160 points worse than the other team. Spoiler alert, Bulgaria is 160 points worse than Ireland. The game gets like really dirty. There's a bunch of fouls that happen. One of the fouls is called, quote, excessive use of elbows. That's like the official ruling. The ref blows the whistle and then goes, excessive use of elbows, which is just an amazing name for a foul.
Yeah.
When this happens, the leprechauns, like the fish in Finding Nemo, spell the words ha ha ha, which is like, holy shit, I love the Irish Quidditch team. Like, they're my new favorite sports team just because of that.
It's a much better mascot than we just have adult people dressed up as animals, and they have an intelligent cloud.
Later on, the ref gets caught in the trance of the Vera, or the Vila.
So again, like a thing that should just cause a halt to the game entirely.
Yeah.
Like the referee has just stopped paying attention.
Yeah. But nope, everything's still going on.
Yeah.
He gets, wooed by them, so he starts like flexing for them. So the medical staff has to like come on with their ears plugged and then snap him out of it. That explains why Mr. Weasley, when Bulgaria first scored, told everybody to plug their ears. That's when you learn that it's like the song that puts people in the trance.
Right.
The ref then sends away the mascots. like that was dirty, go away,
Yeah.
which has never happened before, which is really cool. Then in response to that, the leprechauns spell he, which is amazing.
Yeah, they're just internet trolls.
They're basically just like lol wrecked. After spelling he, they quote, form the shape of a hand showing a very rude sign indeed.
Oh,
so basically
what could that be? I have no idea what that could be.
no clue. So they make a middle finger, and the Vila like get enraged, and they all turn into these evil, scary bird things, and then start throwing fireballs at the leprechauns.
Yeah. Shubes, I think you and I would be in agreement. This is way more interesting than the actual game of Quidditch.
Of course. This is so much better.
There should just be mascot wars.
Vila versus Leprechaun the war. So much better. So then Mr. Weasley turns to the kids and is like, that's why you should never go after someone based on looks alone, which is a great little positive message. Like, don't fall for someone just because they're hot. They might turn into an evil bird and then murder you with fire.
Yeah. What does that say about Molly, Mr. Weasley? Jeez.
She's really ugly, but she doesn't murder me, which is the sign of a good wife. So Crumb gets hit in the nose with a beater at some point, which breaks his nose. The ref somehow doesn't see this. Also, they don't have multiple refs in Quidditch. There's like 4 balls and 1 ref. Like even soccer has 3 refs and there's only 1 ball. It's ridiculous.
Right, yeah. Like the only sport that has a single ref is like fighting, like 2-person sports.
Yeah. You need at least like 10 referees for this, and they have 1. So his nose is broken. The fans are like, oh, another medical timeout or whatever. But then the Ireland Seeker sees the snitch, and then Crumb's like, nope, fuck my nose. And he just like flies over it. And it turns out to be the same situation where they're both dive bombing towards the ground. They peel away. The Irish sneaker again like runs into the ground, but Crumb catches the snitch. But the problem was, they're such shit at Quidditch that they were down 170-10, so they still lose by a final score of 170-160. So that fulfills the prophecy of Crumb gets the snitch, but Ireland will win.
Right, yeah.
So I'm really curious as to how the twins knew. Ron asks, like, wait, why did he do that? Harry, who now has a bunch of profound wisdom about Quidditch, even though he didn't know the outcome of the last World Cup game, is like, oh, Crumb clearly knew that the Irish chasers were too good and the game was only going to get more out of hand, so he wanted the game to end on his terms. So he caught the snitch. It just, like, seems really weird and dumb. It's like, why would you actively take the chance to lose the game? Also, you only needed to score 1 more quaffle throw, and then you tie it if you catch a snitch. So Crumb could have just like followed the snitch around and then yelled to his team like, guys, stop sucking and throw a quaffle through and then I'll grab it, but score first.
Yeah, it's very bad on the field logic.
Yeah.
I feel like JK was probably, when she set up the rules, she was like, oh, this would be like a fun, weird circumstance that like is kind of quirky, but like it doesn't make any sense.
No. I don't think JK's ever played a sport based on Quidditch.
No.
I don't think she has. You then learn, apparently, that the Bulgarian minister can speak English, but he had been making Fudge mime for him all day. And Fudge was like, why'd you make me do that? And then the Bulgarian minister says, quote, well, it was very funny, which all have V's in the text. So Bagman then pays the twins, who are grinning profusely, which really makes me think they were up to some shit.
Yeah, totally.
So then we get into Chapter 9. Chapter 9, The Dark Mark. Fred and George say that they have big plans for their money, and then Mr. Weasley is going to ask them, but then conveniently decides he doesn't want to know what they want to do with the money. Damn it, J.K. Rowling. How many times are you going to do this where it's like, set up something important? Nah, we'll learn about it later. So they all head back to their tents, and they all go to sleep, but they are urgently awoken by Mr. Weasley, who's like, guys, you got to get up. And they're like, what's going on? And they go outside, and things have changed from happy screaming to people running and everything on fire.
Yeah, just absolute chaos.
Yeah, absolute mayhem. So it turns out that a group of wizards who are tightly packed with their wands pointing straight up in the sky and a burst of green light are just like terrorizing the grounds. They're all wearing hoods and masks. They're just, wrecking shit all along the way, and they're floating muggles above them, and they're turning girls upside down so that you can see their underwear under their dresses, which is obnoxiously childish.
Yeah.
Like, they're supposed to be the most evil group of wizards, and they're like, guys, what if we turn people wearing dresses upside down so you could see their panties?
That's true.
Fucking lit, dude.
Yeah, that's true. It's like flipped where like Malfoy is doing the most heinous, like horrible types of bullying, and then these actual adult criminals are just like schoolyard bullies.
Oh, that's so good. I didn't even realize that. So Malfoy then shows up, speak of the devil. Ron curses at him, and the narrator won't even say what he said, but it says, like, Ron says something at Malfoy that Mrs. Weasley surely wouldn't approve of. So this is the second time where they've, like...
Yeah, that's like the second time in a handful of pages.
They're like, the middle finger, but they didn't say it, or Ron dropped an F-bomb, or called him an asshole, or whatever, but wouldn't say it. Malfoy is oddly positive about the whole thing with the evil people, which means his dad is obviously with them.
Totally.
He goes on to say that Hermione should look out because if they would be able to tell that she's a mudblood and they'd do the same thing to her too. So Harry's like, oh, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Where's your dad? And he's like, even if he was with them, I wouldn't tell you, which means his dad totally there.
Is 100% there. Just a total piece of garbage.
So then the kids are going around and trying to get to safety. They bump into French people from the French school, which I'm assuming is the hot wizard girls that come in with Flo Della whatever.
Yeah, I believe so.
Flo Delacour, whatever her name is. Hot Frenchie. They're like walking around, and Harry eventually realizes that he's lost his wand, and he's freaking out, doesn't know where it is. My initial question, why is there no spell to get your wand back? It seems like there should be something, right?
Yeah, we have Find My Phone. There should be like some sort of a find your wand.
Exactly. The squad sees a bunch of young wizards under the spell of another Vila trying to impress them. They run into Bagman, who's really frantic, being like, what's going on? And then they're walking around, and it's just the squad, and they hear a creepy voice from the forest yell, Moors Mord, really loudly, and then the Dark Mark logo is in the sky, which is like the bat signal for Voldemort.
Yeah.
Everybody screams and runs away, except for Harry, who, being a fucking idiot, goes closer to the bush and is like, who's there? And Hermione's like, go out of the way, you're so stupid.
Yeah, while he's unarmed.
This is literally a sign that means Voldemort is either here or coming, or that's Voldemort. Like, you are so stupid. They run away, and as they do so, 20 wizards immediately apparate all around them and yell stupefy. But Harry's like, quick, duck, which is good enough to get away from the spell. And then Mr. Weasley's like, wait, that's my son. You learn that these 20 wizards are the Ministry of Magic people that are trying to, like, calm what's going down. They ask them what happened, because at first they think they conjured the Dark Mark, and they're like, no, it was someone in the woods. And Mr. Crouch is being super pissy and sassy, and he's like, I don't believe you, Hermione, being really annoying, more like Mr. Grouch, am I right?
You are right. Yeah, he's just like interrogating these children who obviously they point out, and he eventually comes around to the idea that they would be the least likely people to ever like put the Dark Mark into the sky.
Exactly. All the other people are like, yo, this is really dumb. So they check the woods and they find Winky, the house elf of Mr. Crouch in the woods. And Winky has a wand, which is really suspect. Mr. Diggory comes out and he's like, oh, that's embarrassing. And Mr. Crouch was like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, yo, this is your house elf. Like, clearly something is up. And Mr. Crouch gets, like, really defensive. Like, painfully defensive, which really makes me think that he did it. They bring Winky back to life from the stupefy spell.
The weird thing about this is, so they appeared in a circle around the kids, and they all used stupefy, and someone outside of the circle got hit, but they didn't all just hit each other. Like, they should have all just, like, collapsed as soon as... It's a very bad strategy to catch someone.
The geometry doesn't add up. Because it, like, went off to the side into the woods, so I don't know. Maybe they all, like, perfectly canceled out, except for one, like, went by to the left.
Very organized spellcasting.
Oh, man. So they bring Winky back to life from stupefy, and then Harry's like, wait a second, that's my wand. And Mr. Diggory at first is like, oh yeah, did you do it? And Mr. Weasley's like, why would Harry do the Voldemort thing? And he's like, yeah, you're right, that was stupid. Like, quickly sweeps it under the rug. I just thought it was really funny. So they then use a spell to see what the last spell used by a wand was. So it's basically like checking the sent box of your Gmail.
Right, yeah.
Like, see whatever the last spell is.
Which could be, like, very embarrassing. Yeah, it's like going through someone's browser history.
It's like, oh, your last spell was penis enlargo? They figure out that the last spell used was to make the Dark Mark happen. And Mr. Crouch goes crazy defensive again. And he's like, oh, you think I just teach my house elf how to do this curse in my spare time? And Mr. Diggory's like, no, I never said that. And he's like, oh, like he like keeps thinking. He's so painfully defensive, which is like so obvious, but no one is catching on to this. Apparently everyone else is also a 9-year-old reading this book. They also reveal that Mr. Crouch never showed up to the final. Mr. Weasley's like, where were you? And he's like, oh, I was busy. Busy? This is the most important event in wizarding history. And you're just like,
this is why you're here.
Yeah, you have the best seats in the house, and you're just like, oh, I can't, I got to do this thing. Yeah, clearly you got to bring Voldemort back to life or whatever.
You just leave your terrified elf like up in the rafters for all this time.
And Hermione points that out to him, and nobody catches along with this. Crouch says that rather than let Mr. Diggory take Winky in for questioning, which would be like standard protocol, he's like, I'll deal with her myself, and then I'll give her clothes so that she's free and won't be my servant anymore. Like, obviously the most suspect, like, destroying of evidence ever, but nobody catches on. Everyone's like, okay, whatever, cool. They go back to the tent. Of course, Percy takes Crouch's side in the argument, which Percy continuing to cement himself as the worst. And Ron has kept asking everybody, like, as this whole thing has been going on, he's like, wait, what does the sign mean? Why is everyone so scared of the logo? And everybody, like, keeps not answering him. So the third time he asks, they're like, oh, fine, we'll tell you, just shut up. They basically say that the dark mark is Voldemort's logo, and they shone it up into the sky anytime after they killed someone. So, like, if they went to your house and murdered someone, you'd, like, come home and you'd see that above your house and you'd be like, fuck.
Yeah.
So it basically was their thing that would intimidate fear into people because it's something you never wanted to see.
Terrifying calling card.
The worst thing, like the anti-bat signal. Another thing is that this is the first time that the sign has been seen in 13 years. So that's extra adding fuel to the fire of people freaking out. You then learn that the group of Voldemort's followers are called the Death Eaters, which is way better than calling him my disciples or whatever they called them before.
Yeah, totally. It's a good name.
It makes me think that JK like didn't think of a good one until 3 books in. She's like, man, what am I going to call these people? And then finally someone's like, yo, you should call them the Death Eaters.
Yeah. No, that's probably good if like her ability to name things like the Putter Outer and all these other
so bad.
all these other things, they would have been called like the Batty Boys if she had named them in the first few books.
Her early naming of things, really bad. Later on, gets better. Less people with alliteration names.
Right.
And naming the teacher Sprout who teaches about plants. Like,
or just spelling a word backwards.
Like, the Mirror of the Desire backwards. Yeah, she's definitely doing a better job of naming things. So apparently the Death Eaters disapparated once they saw it. To which my initial question was like, wait, why would they go away when they saw this? And then, like, the next sentence, Ron asks, wait, why would they go away when they saw it? And then Bill says, quote, use your brain, Ron. And I'm like, hey, fuck you, Bill.
Hey, man, I take that personally.
Your hair is stupid. Your clothes are ugly. No one likes your earring. Like, you're the cheapest Weasley, which is why you were the one that they got you for the ride, because they spent all their money on decorations and budgeting for getting the actors was the lowest priority. So they got Bill fucking Weasley. Like, fuck off.
Yeah.
I don't know why this.
Another detail that I forgot about Bill is he says, what does he say? His mom's is like condemning the way he dresses and stuff. I think it's when she wants to cut his hair. And he says, they let you wear whatever you want when you bring in the treasure.
Yes.
And he works at a bank.
Yes.
Well, who... Is that a thing? Like, is money just transferred? Is it just called treasure in the Harry Potter world?
I don't know.
Or is he going out and, like, getting treasure?
Yeah, I'm like, is he, like, actually a gold miner? Like, not actually a banker? He just, like, finds gold reserves?
Yeah, like... It sounds like you don't work at a bank at all, man. That's not what bankers do.
Or J.K. Rowling's also never been to a bank, in addition to never playing sports.
It's not familiar with the core pieces of our society.
So Bill then describes, he's like, obviously, since they saw the sign and Voldemort really was back, they'd all be in deep shit because any Death Eater that isn't in Azkaban means they lied to the public that they were bewitched and didn't actually like Voldemort. Voldemort. So it makes sense, but is not readily apparent, Bill, you fucking asshole. So Mr. Weasley is unsure. He's like, I don't know if whoever made the Dark Mark was doing it to scare away the Death Eaters or to show their support for them. He does note that the only people who know the spell to make the Dark Mark are Death Eaters. So it's either someone who is a current Death Eater or is a past member. And the fact that he specifically mentions was a Death Eater in the past makes me think that the person that did it was a Death Eater in the past and did it to scare them away. That's just my initial thought. Right. Even though the sketchiness of Crouch and Winky is obscene and ridiculous, it also makes me think by Mr. Weasley being like, it could be someone who used to be a Death Eater, makes me think that it was like someone who was and then turned good.
Right, just the introduction of that concept.
Yes. The fact that he had to lay that out. So that's the end of chapter 9. And we get into chapter 10, the most worthless chapter in the history of literature.
Yep. Another, like, completely throwaway. In these, like, first 10, I feel like at least 3 of them are totally not necessary.
And this was the most unnecessary. And I think it's great that we're ending this episode on this chapter so we can just end it on, like, a because it's called Mayhem at the Ministry. Literally, all that happens is first they go home. And Mrs. Weasley is like, oh, thank God you're okay. Okay, first off, no way to, like, call people with wands, one.
Right.
Even if that's not the case, nobody wrote her a letter. Like, she's gonna find out that there was fucking Voldemort, and no one's like, hey, honey, by the way, me and all of your children are safe.
Are safe and sound.
Like, nobody, she just had to, like, well, I hope they come home. Like, what the fuck? Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous that she was just worrying for, like, a day and a half.
They're not good family members. They need to invent some sort of wizard texting so they can be like, hey, we're okay.
Yeah, we're not dead.
We're safe.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So she shows them a newspaper that's got, the headline of it and this big anti-ministry piece written by Rita Skeeter, who's got a great name.
Yeah.
And she's just very inflammatory, saying that, the security was terrible. What the hell is the Ministry of Magic doing?
That's a great, like, stirring the pot reporter name.
Rita Skeeter, ham.
Yeah.
Harry then gets the squad to the side, and then he's like, hey, this makes sense. My scar was hurting the other day. I had the dream, blah, blah, blah. Trelawney did that whole weird thing where she predicted that Voldemort's coming back, and they're like, she's a hoax.
Yeah, I like how in, like, the world of magic, the stuff that, like, is... I don't know what that would have been, tea reading. Like, that people are skeptical of that, even though magic exists. It's like, what?
Oh, ridiculous. But yeah, when she did that, she was just, like, possessed, and, like, her eyes rolled back in her head, and she was like, Voldemort is coming back. Like, that's way more effective than tea reading, I think.
Totally.
Harry then tells them that he wrote to Sirius, and they're like, oh, good idea. That was smart. Ron's like, hey, Harry, why don't we take our mind off this and play 3-on-3 Quidditch with my brothers? And hold on, you can't fucking play 3-on-3 Quidditch.
Yeah, how does that work?
That doesn't work. There's more balls than people.
Yeah.
Like, you have more balls than teammates. You got the snitch, you got the quaffle, you got 2 beaters, you got 3 people. Like, what happens?
Just another instance of JK breaking her own fiction.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't play baseball with less than 9 people on each team. Like, there's no way that you can just be like 3-on-3 Quidditch. That'll work. Like, you could maybe do 5-on-5 or something, but you can't have less people on your team than balls.
Right.
Like, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You would basically have to say one person just follow the snitch around, one person do the quaffle, and one person take care of both of the beaters. Oh, no one has a goalie anymore.
Right, yeah. No, it falls apart very quickly
ridiculous.
if you try to assign roles.
So silly. Later, you learn about this, like, Weasley clock that says where all the people are, which is actually a really cool thing. This is, like, the only thing of value in this chapter.
Yeah. It's too bad the clock couldn't tell Molly that everyone was okay.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming that it was stuck to the Mortal Peril one, but you learn that basically this clock has 9 hands for all of the Weasleys,
right?
And the options that it can turn to are home, school, work, prison, traveling, lost, hospital, and mortal peril. So I'm assuming every Weasley was on mortal peril and for a long amount of time, and she was like, fuck.
Yeah, hopefully it, like, moves pretty quickly, because I'm sure when it's, like, passing by certain ones of those, you just have a heart attack.
Yeah, and I would also hope that, like, the minute that the Death Eaters disapparated, it changed from mortal peril to traveling.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, okay, they're just not home. You then learn that Mr. Weasley has been working super hard and super long hours in the ministry because a lot of people are sending him complaints in the form of growlers or screamers or whatever the mean letters are howlers. That's what they are.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been sending in howlers, just complaining about the security and people wanting like money for their tents getting destroyed and all this stuff. And then Percy's bitch ass is like, well, if Dad didn't say anything to the press, he wouldn't have been in this situation. Like, that's why he's working late hours. And Mrs. Weasley's like, yo, fuck you.
Yeah, Percy's the worst. He's this bureaucrat. He's trying to suppress information like from people. He's terrible.
So Mrs. Weasley's like, yo, what are you doing? Like, that is your father. How dare you speak ill on your father for trying to help?
Percy. Just the worst.
Awful. So that happens, and then the final thing to happen is that before they're getting ready to go off to Hogwarts, Mrs. Weasley gives Ron some ugly clothes that he's supposed to wear to a ball that you go to, after your fourth year at Hogwarts.
I think they're dress robes.
That's it.
It's this very ugly, like red, sort of like a crimson robe with a fluffy collar.
Yes,
I believe
it's like a pirate.
It sounds just like a grandma's nightie or something like that.
So she gives Ron this thing. He already hates crimson because it's the color of the Weasley sweaters, even though Gryffindor's colors are red.
Right.
But he's like, I hate this color. I don't want to wear this. And that's the end of the chapter. A completely worthless chapter and an end to a completely worthless section of this book.
That chapter is literally just about them being at home and then hearing about stuff happening in a bureaucratic
Pretty much
space.
That's all that happens.
Just secondhand bureaucratic news. Like, everyone's the most enthralling writing.
Yeah, so that's it. But man, that is the end of our little section. It wasn't that this first section was terrible. It was just so much of it was unnecessary. And there were some parts that were really cool, like the omnioculars and the tents. Like, I wish they would just describe more wizarding things rather than, like, tell us for 5 pages that Mr. Weasley's having a rough go at work.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the point that I made in the first episode that we record about... I really do feel like there are good books in every single one of the Harry Potter books, but I think that they could have used a little editing. I mean, there is something nice about the idea of children reading books that are 700 pages. Like, that's a good thing. Kids should be doing a lot of reading. But some of the time spent on certain things in this first 100 pages is just not great.
A bit much. But... it was a good time, and it was a fun time talking about it with you, David.
I had a great time.
Everyone listening, if you wanna follow David on social media, it's David Tress. Just search for him. Maybe Vine will still be around by the time this is posted, but probably not. But yeah, David, thanks so much for being a part of this, and listeners, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, as they say in Hogwarts, wizard on.
Yep, wizard on, everybody. Bye.
Potterless is created by Mike Schubert, it is hosted by Mike Schubert, it is edited by Mike Schubert, it is produced by Mike Schubert, as well as Aaron Johnson, Vicky Garcia, Andreas Ozelby, Griffin Meckelberg, and Leanne Davis, and the music is by Bettina Campamanes. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us at Twitter at PotterlessPod, Facebook.com/Potterless, and Patreon.com/Potterless, where you can support the podcast in exchange for bonus content like behind the scenes, bonus episodes, my notes, director's commentary, all sorts of fun stuff like that. If that sounds like something interesting to you, great. If not, no big deal. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, wizard on!